Hello, everyone. This is Dan Riley for Sports Talk. Like many of my listeners, the last few weeks have been a sportsless existence. The Korean Baseball Association's games have felt like a godsend in a landscape of empty stadiums, a lack of real news on ESPN, and the feeling of this is it that none of us can stand. Still, something bigger needs to be addressed here. ESPN has found that if things stay similar in the U.S., $12 billion will be lost without sports in cities. The effect will be similar all over the planet, I'm quite sure, without their sports. These games are an absolute gem in terms of helping some people make a living, and I'm not talking about players and coaches. I am talking about grounds crew, beer vendors, the works. Chances are we won't have college football this fall. These towns' sports bars, restaurants, and sporting goods stores will completely lose their revenue. I can't even imagine the toll this will take on the living these individuals have set up for themselves. It's tragic. Look, we're in an economic crisis referred to as the Great Lockdown, and its global effects will apply to sports as well as everyday life. People are going to lose their jobs. NFL cities here in the States will face a similar effect if there's no games this fall, and Major League Baseball and the NBA might as well not even exist right now. In that case, it cannot be great economic times in cities like Calgary or Toronto without the Maple Leafs or Flames. Everyone who works at those hockey rinks are worried about where their next dollar is coming from. Even with Major League Baseball considering having games without fans, no one would drive to the park anyway. What happens to the businesses in those areas? Suddenly, a season without Cardinals baseball becomes an I lost my livelihood issue for many people, not just an issue of civic pride in St. Louis. The point I'm trying to make in this podcast is that after this worldwide pandemic has passed, the economic landscape will have been changed in sports, not just society. Suddenly, these college towns will have less money. Pro sports will have been gone so long, businesses around stadiums all over the planet will have taken a hit, and far too many of the people working in these businesses will have less of a future, and a lot of people in those areas who follow sports won't have had much of a distraction to lift their spirits for quite some time. Here in the U.S., it's going to be without college football or pro basketball. And towns will have too many without work we don't even realize. In short, this sportsless existence isn't just a yearning for distraction. People are losing ways to support themselves because of this. Granted, this podcast isn't an inspiring one, but these really aren't inspirational times. In the time I've been lucky enough to discuss sports with my listeners, I've addressed sports' connection to the real world, trying to get yours, tragedies, and yes, now economics, all in the context of what's going on the field of play. Still, sports can provide hope, which is why we all want the NFL back this fall. Even without fans, or even if it is just a fantasy Roger Goodell is selling. I don't know. Look, it doesn't help either that the economic losses without sports will affect high schools and colleges. It's not just cheap thrills students will lose this fall. For all I know, schools will miss out on money they'll desperately need elsewhere without football on Friday or Saturday nights here in the U.S. Meanwhile, what's happening is the potential death of youth sports in that regard, and again, schools will be left to pay for it, I'm sure. People will be unemployed, and students won't have something to lift their spirits if they are actually taking classes in classrooms. Please, to my listeners all over the world, stay home, stay safe. Just don't forget people's livelihoods are gone because, like a lot of businesses, sports has been shut down. And because the pandemic passes, it doesn't mean we'll be out of the woods either. Too many will be looking for work. Hey, let's not beat around the bush. Most of us won't even bother putting tickets to a game in our budgets once this pandemic ends, will we? We'll have more pressing issues to deal with, like paying our mortgage or other bills. The sports industry, like every other on this planet, will still struggle, as will we. This is no time to expect things to instantly return to normal economically once this pandemic is over, whether in sports or any other industry. That's just not how it works. It's really not. That's what's so troubling. Indeed, the economic damage sports faces mirrors consequences we all risk, regardless of the business we work in. Sports aren't played in a vacuum, period. We all need to focus on staying safe right now. Phone your friends, save your money, because we'll all need to. These leagues are doing the same thing, I promise you. This is more of a time to worry about people's health and livelihoods, which is why we can't afford to worry about actual games right now. I'm more concerned about the future of the grounds crew at Lambeau Field than Aaron Rodgers' finances anyway, because Aaron Rodgers can afford to get by with less. The sports world, like any part of society, has been shaken up by COVID, and we hear of sports personalities getting sick, and now we're left to realize no one is immune from the virus. Hotels that keep teams housed the night before games risk losing business. No, college and pro sports aren't returning for quite some time, and we are missing out on more on just our favorite teams. It's like so many of us, people involved in putting these games together, face a future as uncertain as any of ours. Going forward, we need to consider worrying for an entirely different set of reasons than, say, if Major League Baseball has another strike. Because look, if they do, grounds crew and beer vendors are missing out on a paycheck when no games are played. That's the real tragedy. When pro sports comes back, we may see some penny pinching, not just by fans who cannot afford a ticket. Teams may fold, games are canceled, the works. The great sports cancellation of 2020 is going to have financial repercussions for years, and it could be painful to watch. Look, sports may be fun, but the business side obviously isn't, for a simple reason. A lot of people, like many of us, are worrying about how to put food on the table and pay their bills more than ever before. This is Dan Riley for Sports Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in, and so long.